Hello there. Before I begin with Aurobindo, it seems to me that human life and spiritual development has not been properly understood, perhaps by anyone, even Gurdjieff. He was an expert at how things should be and what their true function is. But perhaps what is also needed is a deeper understanding of the false crystallizations that have occurred inside of people on this planet in this era, because that is what people encounter inside themselves. And I'm not sure that has been properly understood. And this is from Sri Aurobindo. It's called Soulless Human Beings, Organic Portals. Question. There are some human beings who are like vampires. What are they, and why are they like that? Aurobindo. They are not human. There is only a human form or appearance. They are incarnations of beings from the world that is just next to the physical, beings who live on a plane which we call the vital world. It is a world of all the desires and impulses and passions, and of movements of violence and greed and cunning and every kind of ignorance. But all the dynamisms too are there, all the life energies and all the powers. The beings of this world have by their nature a strange grip over the material world and can exercise upon it a sinister influence. Some of them are formed out of the remains of the human beings that persist after death in the vital atmosphere near to the earth plane. His desires and hungers still float there and remain in form even after the dissolution of the body. Often they are moved to go on manifesting and satisfying themselves, and the birth of these creatures of the vital world is the consequence. But these are minor beings, and if they can be very troublesome, it is yet not impossible to deal with them. There are others far more dangerous, who have never been in human form, never were they born into a human body upon earth. For most often they refuse to accept this way of birth because it is slavery to matter, and they prefer to remain in their own world, powerful and mischievous, and to control earthly beings from there. For if they do not want to be born on earth, they do want to be in contact with the physical nature, but without being bound by it. Their method is to try first to cast their influence upon a man. Then they enter slowly into his atmosphere, and in the end may get complete possession of him, driving out entirely the real human soul and personality. These creatures, when in possession of an earthly body, may have the human appearance, but they have not a human nature. Their habit is to draw upon the life force of human beings. They attack and capture vital power whenever they can and feed upon it. If they come into your atmosphere, you suddenly feel depressed and exhausted. If you are near them for some time, you fall sick. If you live with one of them, it may kill you. Question. But how is one to get such creatures out of one's environment when they are once there? Aurobindo. The vital power incarnated in these beings is of a very material kind, and it is effective only within a short distance. Ordinarily, if you do not live in the same house, or if you are not in the same company with them, you do not come within their influence. But if you open some channel of connection or communication, through letters for example, then you make possible an interchange of forces and are liable to be influenced by them, even from a far distance. The wisest way with these beings is to cut off all connection and have nothing to do with them, unless indeed you have great occult knowledge and power and have learned how to cover and protect yourself. But even then it is always a dangerous thing to move about with them. To hope to transform them as some people do is a vain illusion, for they do not want to be transformed. They have no intention of allowing any transformation, and all effort in that direction is useless. These beings, when in the human body, are not often conscious of what they really are. Sometimes they have a vague feeling that they are not quite human in the ordinary way, but still there are cases where they are conscious, and very conscious. Not only do they know that they do not belong to humanity, but they know what they are, act in that knowledge, and deliberately pursue their ends. The beings of the vital world are powerful by their very nature. When to their power they add knowledge, they become doubly dangerous. There is nothing to be done with these creatures. You should avoid having any dealings with them unless you have the power to crush and destroy them. If you are forced into contact with them, beware of the spell they can cast. These vital beings, when they manifest on the physical plane, have always a great hypnotic power, for the center of their consciousness is in the vital world and not in the material, and they are not veiled and dwarfed by the material consciousness as human beings are. What can I say? Well, it is one thing to see somebody struggling, even if they manifest in a bad way. Inside there's a person who is struggling, and they are struggling because they are struggling with the dark forces of life. Far more dangerous are people who aren't struggling, of which you see many today. People who seem comforted in the new world order. But before being too frightened about these kinds of things, I think we have to understand that truth, light, reality is a consequence of our honest struggle and our wisdom. There is always a conflict between light and dark, between the forward flowing and the backward flowing stream from the source. It is always like that, and we will always have to struggle. Moreover, in terms of the planes of consciousness, these beings have some power and intelligence because they are close to the human plane, and the planes of consciousness exist in tiers. So it is always like that. Our tier of consciousness, within which we inhabit and feed and perform our reciprocal maintenance, is maintained, and below our tier there is a darker tier, and below that tier an even darker tier. That is the way it is, and that's all according to law. It cannot be otherwise. And above this tier there are lighter tiers. So everything is according to law, and if you're on the path, you simply wish to move up, that's all. Now I'm going to read out a few paragraphs from Gurdjieff on the subject of humanity losing its mind in the time of revolutions that seems to be very pertinent to what's happening in the world today. Gurdjieff says, "The fact is that the enormous majority of people do not want any knowledge whatever. They refuse their share of it, and do not even take the ration allotted to them in the general distribution for the purpose of life. This is particularly evident in times of mass madness, such as wars, revolutions, and so on, when men suddenly seem to lose even the small amount of common sense they had and turn into complete automatons, giving themselves over to the wholesale destruction in vast numbers, in other words, even losing the instinct of self-preservation." Ouspensky says, When I thought of what had been said about wars, revolutions, migrations of peoples and so on, when I pictured how masses of humanity could move under the control of planetary influences, I began to understand our fundamental mistake in determining the actions of an individual. We regard the actions of an individual as originating in himself. We do not imagine that the masses may consist of automatons obeying external stimuli and may move not under the influence of the will, consciousness, and inclination of individuals, but under the influence of external stimuli, coming possibly from very far away. And I'm in the mood to read out a couple of stanzas from the Daodejing. After a bitter quarrel, some resentment must remain. What can one do about it? Therefore the sage keeps his half of the bargain, but does not exact his due. A man of virtue performs his part, but a man without virtue requires others to fulfill their obligations. The Tao of heaven is impartial. It stays with good men all the time. A small country has fewer people. Though there are machines that can work 10 to 100 times faster than man, they are not needed. The people take death seriously and do not travel far. Though they have boats and carriages, no one uses them. Though they have armor and weapons, no one displays them. Men return to the knotting of rope in place of writing. Their food is plain and good, their clothes fine but simple, their homes secure. They are happy in their ways. Though they live within sight of their neighbors, and crowing cocks and barking dogs are heard across the way, yet they leave each other in peace while they grow old and die.